When is it time to rebel? And when is it time not to rebel, but just to get along or go along to get along with your friends? That's what we're going to talk about in today's Freedom Friday. So stick around right on the other side of this. Well, good morning, good citizens. Welcome to another episode of Freedom Friday. It is Friday and you are still not free, but hopefully you will be freer at the end of this show than you are right now. Good morning, Sharif El-Mekki, my partner in crime. How you doing, brother?
Good morning, sir. Good to see you. Happy Friday. We are up in July in heat waves and tornadoes and everything else, but we also up in this Freedom Friday. Freedom Summer again. Let's just Freedom Summer.
We're going to make it Freedom Summer once more.
We're going to make it once more.
There is a book called Freedom Summer by Bruce. Oh, God, I'm going to forget his last name. It might be, I'm going to mess up his last name. Look for the book called Freedom Summer by an author named Bruce, first name Bruce. I will find his last name later. It is a crazy, good detail of what happened during Freedom Summer.
Yeah.
And
our Freedom Schools teacher apprentices, they read that, for a couple summers just to make sure they are grounded. And this is why education and no matter what you're doing, you're a teacher. If you're dope at it, you are a teacher. You're connected to education. And we just thought that was really important background knowledge for our young teacher apprentices. So that's dope. Yeah, absolutely. We should, folks, please get that book.
I should actually see if the author is still doing interviews and maybe get the author on at some point. Anyways, y'all, this book that we're talking about, Freedom Summer, has an extraordinary amount of detail about the movement that contains things that you probably never heard about. At least that was my experience when I read it. And again, in a moment when we are arguing about what we should teach our kids about history and, our struggle and all that, isn't it amazing what we don't teach and what they don't know? And some people are still trying to cut off what we can learn and what we can teach. It's just amazing. It's like they want us to be dumb. They want us to be dumb. Sharif, I want to talk today about rebellion, just in general. You know a lot about our rebellions. I know a lot. But before I do, I want to play a clip. This clip is of Coleman Hughes talking to Charles Murray. People have heard me talk about Charles Murray having a new book coming out. Charles has a new book coming out that basically says that we need to stop talking about systemic racism because it just doesn't exist. The reason for the differences in outcomes between blacks and whites is not because of any systemic racism. The reasoning is because of differences in intellectual capabilities proven by science and empirical knowledge. So Coleman Hughes, a young black conservative, has Charles Murray on and has this conversation with Charles as if he's just talking to any scholar when he's really talking to a eugenicist. And even at one point in it, and this is what black conservatives do to prove that they are broad-minded and not reactionary. He says to Charles, listen, I don't think you're a racist. I know everybody says you're a racist and blah, blah, blah. You seem like a guy that I might want to have a beer with, but I just disagree with you on some things. So let's talk about it or whatnot. When you are so kind of shell-shocked in your life that you tell a eugenicist that you might be a guy that I would want to have a beer with, there's something wrong with your upbringing and your family or your connection to your own people and your history. But that's not what this clip is about. In the interview, which is over an hour long, Charles Murray gives a warning. It's basically a warning to all of us that want to talk about systemic racism and push this issue on white people. And this is his warning. So I'm going to play it for you. And then Sharif, we can talk about it on another side. You can tell me what you think about this here warning and whether you're going to take it. I have a sense that you might not be a big fan of the warning, but we're going to see. Let's see. Again, folks, this is Charles Murray giving us a warning.
Once you start saying, as has been the woke and the critical race theory and the rest the last couple of years, which I just treated initially as, it's academics indulging in recreational radicalism. I never thought it would escape the campus. It's now dominating in the newsrooms of the major media, mainstream media. And it's systemic racism, and everybody's saying it. Well, I'll tell you poison leaking into the system is when you have 13% of the population, which is the Black population, saying to 60% of the population, which is non-Latino, white, you are evil, you are bad, you've got white privilege, it's your fault, it's all your fault, we need reparations, we need the state to systemically increase the advantages that it gives to Blacks and other people of color because this country is so deeply evil and systemically racist. All right. Coleman, the reaction in terms of the elites could not be better from the point of view of the critical race theorists. I mean, white guilt is a real thing. And you had among white elites, mea culpa, mea culpa. That's not the reaction among a lot of middle class and working class whites who have seen themselves the last 20, 30 years as having been respectful and friendly with their Black colleagues at work, who don't consider themselves to be racist, who cannot see what possible white privilege they've ever had. And what the mainstream media cannot bring itself to report on accurately is how many of these whites who formerly were trying their best to follow the American creed of treating people as individuals, what proportion of those are saying, oh, give me a break, I have had it. Quit telling me this stuff about how bad whites have been. If you get that kind of blowback from a large chunk of the population, it's going to take the form of identity politics in which whites start to play identity politics. And if that happens, it's going to be a disaster.
Everything you said,
never going back.
Everything you said in the last 2 minutes, I agree with. Okay.
I just gotta stop right there because I can't with my boy. I just can't. Everything.
And who's the Black guy again?
There is no Black guy in this country. the young deer in the headlights who's interviewing this man who's several times his age, who's talking with the eugenicist and trying to appear to be broad-minded, and everything you just said I agree with, because I believe identity politics on the left is extremely bad, because I don't believe in reparations because conservatives told me that. Anyways, that's Coleman Hughes for people who want to know. If you go and look, I'll put the link into the discussion here so that everybody can see it for themselves. The bottom line for me is it's a masterclass. When you watch the whole thing, it's a masterclass in how not to interview a eugenicist, right? Like we have so lost our bearings that we no longer can even call things what they actually are. You could argue with not even argue, you could interview a straight up Nazi and pretend like you're just talking to Jim down the street. Hey Jim, can I borrow your lawnmower? Like, yeah. Hey Jim, can I borrow your lawnmower? How's it going with that killing people? So anyways, did you catch all of what Charles Murray is warning us about? He's warning us about you're only 13% of the population, Black people. You keep talking a lot of crap to 60% of the population, which is white people. And white people, what you don't want to do is poke the bear. You don't want them to get mad at you and be like, I'm sick of listening to what you just said. He started out by talking about, in this about Oprah Winfrey and Barack Obama and white people seeing these folks ascend and not saying anything about it because they felt like maybe it's a good thing. And, they've been trying to be good to Black people, their colleagues and whatnot, but we just won't shut up about our rights. We just won't shut up about our rights. And what he is saying is really a threat. The threat is, y'all keep talking this nonsense. Watch what happens when white people shoot back on you. And he said, don't worry about those white elites. Worry about the white middle class and working class and underclass who will come for you. So that's Charles Murray, eugenicist, telling you, you numerically outnumbered.
Yeah, I mean, it was a threat, and what he's basically saying, without saying it is, but he is saying it, right? Like, we just have to be clear. He's saying, like, listen, fear the white backlash, because it's going to come. It's like, even the folks who are in the middle and calling themselves your allies, they're going to be sick of you saying, treat me like a human being. At some point, stop asking for, full citizenship. Stop asking for accountability on how these politics and policies, crush Black and brown communities. Like, just be silent, enjoy where you are, be satisfied, stay in your place. It's all the same language that we've heard for years and years and years. Whether it's going to be, we're going to get the whip, we're going to sell you further, deeper south. We're going to have put hoods on. We're going to take them off and just have a backlash. It is the same mindset and this Joker is sitting there like he didn't just hear him talking about exterminating, people that look like him, even if they don't share his socio-political and cultural background.
Yeah. What do you take from this when we think about the history of Black struggle and we think about the importance of rebellion, even when the odds aren't in your favor? Because listen, if I kidnap you and I trap you in a room, you may think no matter what you do is going to be hopeless because I've got you trapped in a room. But do you stop fighting because of that? Do you just succumb and then sit down in the dark and say, this is my life from now on, I will stop struggling? So when you think about all the rebellions in history, failed and successful in Black history, what do you take from how that applies to his point today around you guys are outnumbered, you're only 13% of the population, and 60% of the population is about to grow tired of you real quick?
Yeah, you know what? As they say in Philly, I ain't paying them no never mind. The idea that that there will be backlash has always existed to anyone in this country who said, I'm a human being, you're going to treat me as such. And even if I'm, my struggle is limited because of the confines that you described, that there's still a struggle and there's still a framework that, that we should tap into, a Black blueprint that we should tap into. And the resistance has to continue no matter what. And I think about our ancestors who had far more than, challenges than what he's describing right now, which could be, and I agree with him in a lot of ways like that. And I don't think it would be the full 60%, but yeah, I do agree that there are folks who think like, well, and we hear it. You had Obama, now you got Kamala, now you had this, and you're still asking. Because we're like, no, we're talking about the millions, not the one. They are quick to show the one and then say our work is done. And what we're saying is like, no, like as long as these patterns, these institutions continue. And so I think about the Fannie Lou Hamers. I think about even when places where their numbers of Black people were larger, the risk of violence. When you talked about Freedom Summer, one of the things that I thought about was risking everything, that details some of the, and this again, Freedom Summer reader, some of the, them risking everything for, and they're like, we might not see this freedom, this liberation, this progress, but our descendants, our progeny will, and that's the commitment that I think a lot of us have. Like, yeah, we're going to keep on, it reminds me of a song that Thamo Sasso used to sing, keep on struggling each and every day. All right. Don't give up the faith, y'all, no matter what they say. Some say that we won't win, but that's okay because African people all over the world will be free one day. And, like that was the ingrainment. We were taught how to think. We're also taught how to fight, taught how to love, how to build. But yeah, he's not saying anything new.
I think one of my favorite books in the Bible is Ecclesiastes, because Ecclesiastes is, I think, very level-headed in keeping you level. Like if you want to be a Christian, a level Christian, a person who stays even keel, Ecclesiastes is the book for you. And the thing about the book is if you've heard the famous song from the 60s, Britain, about Ecclesiastes, there's a time to live, a time to die, a time to fight, there's a time to laugh, there's a time to cry or whatnot. Knowing what time it is, I think, is the big thing that Morris Day and the Time tried to tell you. What time is it?
That's why Flavor Flav walked around with that clock, right?
Knowing whether or not it's a time to fight or not, knowing whether it's a time seems smart. And if we think about some of the famous rebellions in history, well, first of all, let me just ask you, as somebody who knows a lot about, African history, what do you make of the fact that there was one African country on the African continent that didn't get colonized? They like Ethiopia found a way to fight back, and to maintain its ground. Do you think there's any lessons for us in that? Do you think there's any lessons for us in like the Mau Mau, who went all out, or the Zulus? They didn't care whether they're going to win or lose. They were just going to fight. Do you think there's lessons to draw from the continent in how we should fight for our freedom?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the history of Ethiopia, I think is really, really important. Not only was it not colonized, but I think one of the main reasons was that they had a history of unity, right? Like it was where many places there were different groups, different tribes, and, all these different languages. And Ethiopia, there was even Islamically, when our Prophet Muhammad was being persecuted by by other tribes in Arabia, he sent a band of Muslims to Ethiopia. And he said, and there you will find a just king. And then even though they were pursued, he was like, nah, he's like the king drew a line in the sand and said the difference between these Muslim refugees, again, how folks treat refugees tells you a lot about their mindset. He said these refugees and us, he drew a line in the sand. The difference is as thin as this line in the sand that I just drew. And so he sent the persecutors back. But what it shows is I think it's instructive that they had this unification, like they were all across this land. They were had this unification. They had a coalesced around a particular thing. And I think that's if we take one thing from it, is what does unification look like? What does unity look like? And how do you do that no matter what lands you find yourself in, what organizations and groups you find yourself in? Unification, and not unity things that you can't be unified about drilling a hole in the hull of the boat. You have to be unified in protecting the boat. Yeah, that's the essence, right? Because some people want to just give you sell you some nonsense and be like, we're supposed to be united. Like, no, we're not united around the dumb stuff, So,
well, I think that's really interesting for us right now to think about, because for most of the Black movement for struggle, or most of the Black struggle, I should say, for freedom in the United States had unifying factors to it that went well beyond what could have divided us. Remember, involuntary immigrants came here from Africa involuntarily from many different tribes that spoke different languages. Some of them found a common language on the ship on the way here. Right. These are people that never had a common language, but they figured out hand signals and different ways to speak to each other for those that were going to try to rebel. Right. They had to quickly overcome their differences. Hey, listen, I know that we're from different tribes. We got different things going on, but we're on the same boat right now. And we in the same situation in this boat. And we better figure out really quickly how to talk to each other for our freedom so that we can fight free. That carries over into the United States. Once they get here, they find a common way of seeing the world, common drumming patterns to warn each other that there are things going on, common ways to sneak information from plantation to plantation or whatnot. They start devising a unified system, a system of being able to work across tribal differences. That works all the way up until the point where you start desegregating the civil rights movement and start dispersing different members of it, and they start tasting the champagne in somebody's penthouse over here and start tasting the Kool-Aid in somebody's project over here, and they start dividing socially. And now it ends up to today where you have somebody like me talking to you on a Friday on a show called Freedom Friday about a dude named Coleman Hughes who's interviewing a eugenicist saying, hey, we should have a beer sometime. Right? How are we gonna find that unifying? What's the unifying thing that we're gonna fight in today that unifies most Black folks towards a common conception of what it actually means to be free when some of them already think that they're completely free as they need to be?
Yeah, listen, there are always in any movement, there are going to be collaborators, like the lost soul that's doing this interview. And so the collaborators are, while there are, we need to be aware of them, know that they're there, that they are there. They're going to, and at least him, he's not being secretive about it. Right. We talk about like some of Malcolm X's bodyguards work for the FBI. Right. So that's how close they can actually get, into our space. So I think, exposing but also making sure that we are sharing on the other side of this is what true unification looks like, and the thing about it, like some of the stuff that they say is so silly, so outrageous that it, is easily debunked. But then also, and we spoke a little bit about this before the show, like, some of these folks were, like literally undermining the work as much as they could, if you saw, we talked about this when we looked at the movie about Chairman Fred Hampton, right? And you had a guy that's like there and constantly trying to undermine, trying to sow the seeds of discord within the organization. Or you talk about the folks who would go and dime on people like, yo, they about to rebel, the enslaved, or have the audacity to say like, yo, we want to be free. So that there's a long legacy of all of this, collaborators to share and to promote white supremacy, to partner with them, to have a beer with them, all of that is, and not doing it strategic, not saying like, all right, this is, infiltrate and double cross. This is like, no, this is infiltrate and kick my feet up. This is infiltrate and enjoy. This is infiltrate and slam the door and help protect it, all of that.
Set up an office, get a secretary, answer your phone like, hello, this is the Negro at White Supremacy Central. May I help you?
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, it's kind of like, yo, we sick boss comes to mind, all the warnings that we've had in the past, just continues. Like history repeats itself. It rhymes, it repeats itself. And, it's important that we, Malcolm used to talk about, even when it's a loss, it's for learning. So if you look at, so keep looking at history. That's why he's always like, study your history, and not just the history of like, oh, this is where we came from, this is what happened. No, study the resistance and what they did, what you could tweak, how it applies, what you can learn. Because anything that they, got to the 90-yard line, but didn't get to the 100th, you can learn from that, and you can make that a difference, right? When Gerald Dess's teacher at Shoemaker started our 8th grade history course, and we switched it out to be social justice, it wasn't just studying activism, it was studying youth activism. So here are these 8th graders, 13, 14-year-olds studying, oh, here's how other teenagers showed resistance in South Africa and the Americas. So he was looking at the organizing around the Soweto. He's looking at, the resistance and apartheid that was being led by youth. He was looking at the Black Panther Party members. He's looking at Malala. That's what they were studying. Youth activists, to see like, okay, what did they do? How, what can you learn from it? And now how can you support your community based off of everything you've learned, And so one of the things that was really important, I think my favorite part of this course, was they had each individual student had to interview 20. They couldn't just say, well, this is what I want to do for the community. This is what I think. This is what I believe. This is what I'm passionate about. Like, it wasn't this ego, like I have all the answers. Every last one of them had to interview 25 community members to see what did they say they wanted. What did they believe was most important? And then they took that and then created coalitions because they had to see who else in my class had something similar to the feedback and the patterns and the themes that I heard from my 25. What did your 25 say? Okay, can we work together? So it was a little bit of training around organizing, but most importantly, listening to the community. And what you see from that young lost brother, what community is he listening to besides that, the racist, right? Like, who is he listening to? And the fact that so many of them, as you said, they find platforms on Fox News and other places. Why aren't you? Where are you in the black churches? Are you in 60th Street? Are you at Masjid Mujahideen? Like, where are you? What's your base? What's your viewers? Where are your listeners? Who's giving you this information? Who's giving you feedback? Who's holding you accountable? Right? And you can see it. And so this is how you winnow this stuff out and you separate the BS from the realness, right? Because like, who is feeding you? And most importantly, who is holding you accountable, right? If your community, if you're not engaged with your community for them to hold you accountable, already know like you're talking the wrong stuff. Because you're not connected to the base of the source of the people, right? You're connected to another whole group. And that's a warning for all of it, whether it's funders, whether it's, your platforms, whatever it is. How are you connected to the Black community and how do you engage with their feedback and accountability systems?
So, one, making sure that we're training young people early, responsibly training them. Like, if we know what we know and they don't yet, responsible parents, community members, adults in the lives of Black children would be preparing them for the world that they are about to go into. And if you want them to be fighters and to be intelligent fighters to fight back against our oppression, you have to train them and prepare them. And that comes with how you teach them. You mentioned Fox News. So on the white side of the fence, young white people and white people in general have major media that's reinforcing all the things that they want them to think every day. We don't own those channels. We don't have that. But one of the very Afrocentric workarounds that you just mentioned that makes a lot of sense to me, we are a relational people. We believe in our heritage and oral history, and we believe that our elders are walking libraries. So connecting our young people to our walking libraries as their CNN, that needs to be their CNN. The way that the way we transmit information through thousands of years is orally through wise people and people that are learning. And maybe that's because this is what I'm pulling from what you just said. That's my very simplistic, overly simplistic pull out of what you said.
No, I think that's great, man. I think I love how you frame that because it's that connection, right? When Marcus Garvey says a people that don't know their history is like a tree without a root. And they just imagine what happened to a tree without roots, right? It dies, right? And that's the same. The resistance can die. Their cultural consciousness can die. Their connections can die. And so we have to, when Marcus Garvey and other folks are saying, sometimes, I know like Ray likes to tease me about the quote, but you know what, like I would say like my family and the community, my teachers, they embedded so many of their lessons in historical context and applying it to the day. And as elementary school students. And I think that's why, and it's not just me, it's my classmates as well, where they can recite poetry and quotes and things like that, because that was the framing, right? The same way if you grow up with a grandparent that, their sayings, their quips, because it's a connection and there's a reason behind those stories, right? And it's not just entertainment, it is to, how do we learn from this? And so that idea of like our own network of information being protected and making sure that our students, our children, our communities are plugged in as we build, and we need to build more North Stars and Philadelphia Tribunes and Pittsburgh Couriers and all the other, Black outlets. Make sure we're members of those, make sure we're supporting them in so many different ways, right? Even if we don't have the Jets and the Ebonies, like find other, other ways to do that. So I love how you frame that, man. I think it's absolutely crucial to the work.
Well, and it comes from what you've been saying for a long time and what you just said today that makes me think that like this is an elegant system for our freedom, which is, training our youth with connections, with relationships, with the information that exists within. And eventually, like, you know this about me, is so many of our friends, our Black friends and our brown friends, and even some of our beige friends that have PhDs.
You and this beige stuff.
Our beige people. Listen, I got to hold up the banner for my beige folks. Like, y'all need to leave us alone. We about to resurface here. Anyways, one thing about them, all those folks that I just named that have PhDs, is to get a PhD, you had to write a dissertation. And that dissertation oftentimes is lost to history once you're done with it, which I think is a incredible waste, which is why I read people's dissertations, number one, as free community scholarship, because you spent all this time working on this, collecting all this stuff. You had to go through a rigorous process. So I get smarter by reading everybody's dissertations. When I meet Dr. Travis Bristol or whoever, and I read their dissertation, he did all the work. I get to just like live off of their scholarship, because most of the time they are studying our community. The only reason I'm bringing this up is because we have this big body of community generated scholarship at even that level. And if we are starting with young people, connecting them to their elders and others as sources of immediate ground level information and history, and then graduating at them as they go on and on and on towards reading the scholarship that has been done on our community by our own people, our doctors, that's like a full range now that we're giving them of understanding about themselves with information that comes from themselves, right? For us, by us. So that's a K-12 kind of system of informal system of knowledge gathering. So I think if rebellion is the goal, you have to start with informed people. You've mentioned this too before. Tell me what's your quote that you talk about, like Malcolm talked about awakening the people first, or trying to like activate a sleeping people or something like that.
Yeah, you can't organize a sleeping people. You wake them up, right? And then they get organized. Like once they're aware, that awareness piece, right? Not allowing folks to be lulled to sleep and saying like, oh, we got Obama, so we can take the our foot off the pedal. Like, nah, don't be lulled, right? And don't try to organize folks, because then they're going to reject you. It's like, oh, what are you talking about? We're fine, right? Like,
they might kill you. They might kill you.
Yeah. Like, what are you talking about? We got a good thing going. Like, no, wake them up, showing the pattern, showing the theme, showing them like, hey, here are all the things that have been going on. That's when folks get organized, right? That's when it's easier, when folks are awakened. When you look at the Black Panther Party, to join, you had to take political education classes, right? You couldn't just join and be like, yeah, I'm just, like, that was what they wanted to do. But, at the same time, they were like so loose that it was all across the country. It wasn't these safeguard, guardrails, and they also said like, hey, you have to study. There are things you actually have to study in order to be a part of this, right? And so that's for any any organizing has to be awareness. It goes back to educate. Everything goes back to learning, education, organizing. Learning, education, organizing. And those concepts.
What I think about is important about those three that you just said like that, though, is you didn't put school in there, right? You said it more broad in that, and as you were talking, I was thinking to myself, fighting over what gets taught in school is a worthy fight, but it's not sufficient to solve our problem, because maybe we need some out of school time stuff to do what you just said, which is a political education for our young people.
Absolutely.
I don't know that we're going to win the battle of getting them a real political education in common schools that they share with. Listen to what Charles Murray's telling you. Yeah. You guys are 13% of the population. We 60% of the population. So y'all gonna lose. If it comes to battling over how the systems are going to operate, and we're 13% of the population. I mean, come on, man. Like, we're gonna lose that battle. But if, like the Jews, the Koreans, the Chinese, and other people, we had out of school time schools. And this to me is like with what Kaya's doing with Reconstruction Ed, to me starts making me see more and more like the utility in something like Reconstruction.us, which is an organization that is clearly about providing additional information, training for young people. This political education you're talking about is rebellion in itself. It is preparation for a good rebellion, for a smart rebellion in life. And it may not happen through somebody else's system. We might need to take it into our own hands.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, things like Reconstruction.us and, freedom schools and every other way that we can inform, so Sister Elaine Wells talks a lot about like all the things she exposed her children for, and she looked at it as part of the education. And I mean, she can name 20, 30 things, and all of these were outside of the whatever school that she, her kids went to. And even some, she found they were in charters, they were in this, they were in traditional, and she was still making sure like, nah, but your education is this whole thing. I pulled up Malcolm's exact quote, because I think it's really instructive. Again, the greatest mistake of the movement, right? So he's not just talking about random, of the movement has been trying to organize the sleeping people around specific goals. You have to wake the people up first, then you'll get action. Right. And so when we're looking at that and also really considering, as you described earlier, everybody doesn't want to end white supremacy. Some of them just want to better their positions within it. When we have those two ideas, and understanding it, then when we're organizing around specific goals, then we know like this is what we are going to be aligned to. And this is our unification process around it. And here's where we need to keep an eye on, the folks who are, want to sleep with the enemy.
Which is a lot of people. Like too many. I do want to pull up for folks here because we're always going to talk about history. We're always going to root things in our own history and try and learn lessons from them. So one of the things I sent you a week or so ago that started us on the path of maybe having this conversation was something about the Stono Rebellion, which came up in my feed. I don't know where, and I don't know how I did not know enough about Stono Rebellion. Seemed like something that was very old to me that I had remembered, but not much about it. The Stono Rebellion was in 1739. It was one of the largest, most successful insurrections within British North America. Happened in South Carolina with a group of slaves who had heard that the Spanish in Spanish Florida were offering complete freedom to any enslaved people that would make it down to Florida. And they set up like a colony there where you could be free. So the lure was, the Spanish were trying to infiltrate. So they set up a free colony and, basically said, if you can get here, you'll be free. Jemmy, who was a enslaved person, a literate enslaved person, wrote liberty on a banner and started walking with a gun with several people, other armed enslaved people, started walking towards their freedom. And as they walked, more people came with them. And it became a large group of enslaved people ready to fight and live and die for their freedom. They were eventually put down. They fought for their freedom. They were eventually put down. The ones that survived were sold off to the West Indies. But there's a lot about this rebellion that is important besides the ending of it. Number one, it started with a literate person, a literate enslaved person who understood what he was hearing. He understood, like you had to be literate to understand that the Spanish were making this offer to you, for instance. You had to know that there was a promised land somewhere, and reading was the way that you knew. And guess what? After this particular rebellion, the restrictions on literacy and reading became like one of the core targets of the plantation owners to stop people from going this direction again. Harsh punishments for literacy, harsh punishments for uppity Negroes who looked like they were going to lead. They were sold off. And what they wanted to keep were only the docile, muscular people. Muscularly docile. Think about that as a preference for the plantation owners. They want you to be hardworking and dumb. Is what they really wanted you to be. They started passing laws that all white men had to carry guns to church because they were afraid that the church on Sunday, the church day, was when slaves were going to plot for their freedom and whatnot. when you start thinking about these things, they're putting it into law that as a white man, you have to carry a gun to church to be ready to fight for your family and your people. Though putting into law that enslaved people should not have any access to literacy, and any of y'all trying to give them some literacy will be punished. We'll fine you. Even if you're white, we'll fine you. As a matter of fact, if you're white, we might fine you double because you're race trading on us or whatnot. Systems. They're putting things into systems. When people talk today about CRT being about race essentialism and immutable characteristics and all that, let's not argue with stupid people. Stupid people who are benefiting from the rest of us staying stupid, because they are literally have succeeded by creating race. There was no black and white as distinct racial categories unless there was law to back it up. They created race essentialism. Charles Murray today is actually re-forwarding his email to America on race essentialism, and you are sucking it down. Your anti-CRT people are reissuing race essentialism and reifying the old white reverse racism meme and trying to redefine what all these things mean. We can't be dumb. When they start putting things into law that stop what we can learn, or how we can learn it, or how our young people should think about the American story, or how we should talk about things like Stono's Rebellion, or all the rebellions that came afterwards, or the laws and the codes that were put into place that prevented us from being literate. And then they attached literacy to voting. And why would you do that? Why would you put those things into law if race is just a social construct? There is no white and there's no black. We're all colorblind, and the law is colorblind. Just follow the laws. Well, if we follow the laws the way that you're supposed to follow laws, like follow their histories and follow where they come from, you will start seeing a picture of what is systemic racism. And I am sorry to Mr. Charles Murray and to his boy wonder there who's interviewing him, Coleman Hughes. I am sorry to inform both of you. Systemic racism is not because there is a difference in cognitive abilities across the races. And you can make that racist claim all you want. And that's what's driving the anti-CRT movement right now. Is we don't want our kids being taught this stuff because we don't think it's the America that we live in. And we think that the only reason that you all are having a tough time in this America is because you have a problem. You have a problem with crime. You have a problem with fatherlessness. You have a problem with drugs. You have a problem with behaving. You have a adverse impact on schools. The whole acting white thing. They have a whole rationale for why we shouldn't look at the laws that have been passed. The laws about housing and where you can live. The laws about education and where you can go to school and what you can learn. The laws about voting and how you can. Every one of those things I just said has an ancient kind of example and a current one.
And a contemporary, yep, absolutely.
And a contemporary one. Racism is unceasing in the United States, whether the devil wants you to know it or not. It is unceasing. And if you are a beneficiary of it, you have all the reason in the world to deny it and doubt it. If you are the victim of it, you're kind of dumb to go along with the big lie, the gaslighting. That's my speech. I got to give a speech, I think, every single time.
No, and then you bring up all the points, right? Like, it's not just, it's not ancient, because that's what they want you to tell. Like, all these are relegated to the archives and in the basements of the National Library and National Archive system. Like, nah, like, look at that symbol of justice with that woman holding the scale and blindfolded, like, she's peeking under that thing. It's either see-through or she's peeking under it, because she's remarkably accurate for a blindfolded person to keep, it's just like the best marksman in the world that keeps targeting Black and brown communities, anciently as well as current, as you described, and, as we're going through these processes and these, and some of these arguments are so silly, right? But we're still engaging, right? And one of the things that I remember, I was talking about this to some of my classmates. I literally had to text, my classmates were like, yeah, what was that acronym we used to have? I remember it was NERCAT, but I couldn't remember all of the what it stood for. And it's like when we were like, and I've shared this, like we didn't take regular gym. We took martial arts for our physical education, Vitasana. And one of the acronyms that we had to learn was NERCAT, NERCAT, which stood for like in these conflicts. And we had to learn, like, this is what you do during conflict. You negotiate, you explain, like, yo, here's the situation. This is why this is, your side. You relocate if possible. You caution, you attack, and then you teach. That's what NERCAT was. This is what, as children, we were learning, like, when folks are being hostile. Like, these are the things, and I think that teach part was, you know what I mean. Even as 6 and 7-year-olds, we were learning, like, the teaching piece was always like, because you're teaching one group, but you always have to defend yourself. Like, there's always defense, and not just physical defense, but also emotional defense of our children, cultural defense, intellectual defense. Right? Like today, this Charles Murray, like, it sounds like modern day phrenology to me. Modern day, where they had to come up, like, how do we justify genocide of Native American people? All right, we have to come up with something, right? We have to, there's some white folks who are feeling a little squeamish about, massacring the whole, communities of men, women, and children. So, you know what? This phrenology will work. They did the same. They tried to do the same thing with Africans. We have to justify enslavement. So let's use the shape of skulls and forgetting how diverse Africa was. So for you to take one skull and then say this is, like, it's so ridiculous. Like the pseudoscience of it all. So they had a racist construct and then say, how do we justify the racist construct? Let's steal this passage. Arabs did it too. Let's steal this ayat from Quran. Let's take this passage from the Bible. Let's use this pseudoscience, right? It was always in justification of the horrific brutality that they were exposing human beings to around the world, right? And so it was this constant piece. And so that phrenology, they don't call it that anymore. But now it's, cognitive ability. Now it's like there's always the same thread. And that's why, again, the history is so important, because you'll see, wait a minute, this is the same exact pattern of speech. This is the same thing.
Yeah.
It's the same exact stuff.
Pattern recognition will keep you alive.
Yeah.
If you live in a system of oppression and you can recognize, wow, okay, we've seen this before. Oh, so one of the best things we can give our children and young people is pattern recognition. Like, listen, youngin', I might die at some point, and I won't be here to remember all the patterns and tell you all the patterns I see when something pops up. So what I'm going to need to help you do is, even after I'm dead and gone, is to, when something pops up new that I'm not here for, and that's new in the world, for you to be able to say, I remember how this, it's like coding. Like, I remember the sequence of this. Oh, yeah, okay. So, because the devil will always reinvent new ways to oppress you. Exactly. So maybe giving our young people pattern recognition. And that's really what drives my thinking on all of these things that we're talking about, is like, new stuff comes up and I'm like, that's not new. That's really not new. Like, if Pepsi tomorrow, if Pepsi decided to put out, they said, we're going to put no colors in our pop or soda or whatever you call it, where you're at. And I know this is a weird analogy, but we're gonna put Pepsi in a bottle. Go ahead. Yeah, we're gonna put Pepsi in a bottle without any coloring. You're gonna be able to see straight through it, but it's still gonna taste like Pepsi. Young people would be like, this is novel, this is cool, this is weird. And I'd be like, that's called Pepsi Clear. And we had it in the 80s, and it lasted for about a year or two, and then it was gone. I would have pattern recognition. I know it's a weird analogy, but I'm just saying, because you have the benefit of 30 years on somebody else around, they may think that things are new. You will see it as old. And if you can help them understand that, that makes a lot of sense. In helping them, I think, helping them to be free. Now, one point I do want to ask you about on this, it's becoming abundantly clear to me that you can't teach white kids and black kids the same thing. Like the common school idea, the idea that we can all go to school together and we can have an agreed upon common way of teaching this. stuff that we're talking about, all of this history or whatnot, is probably logically not going to happen for one reason. It is not in white parents' best interest for their children to be taught an accurate history of the United States and the country that they live in, and to blow up all of their illusions about where they live and what they live in and what they benefit from. Whether we think it's true or not it doesn't matter. Whether it's true or not, it's not in their best interest to learn those things. It's in their best interest to put their fingers in their ears and not listen to any of that and just think about white American nationalist exceptionalism and think of all those exotic, weird people saying those exotic, weird things about this beautiful, beautiful country as exotic, weird people that we don't have to listen to because we outnumber them by like 3 or 4 to 1. That's in their best interest to do that. So we got to stop arguing with people that have an interest, a vested interest in actually not being realistic. And at the same time, it's not in our kids' long-term survival interest to allow them to buy into that vanilla Kool-Aid about the country that they live in and develop a whole bunch of Coleman Hughes, because there's no power in that. There's no future in that. There's no freedom in that. There's no justice in that about to happen. So how are we going to reconcile the fact that actually this thing is unwinnable if our goal is to have a common school system where everybody goes through the same door and they learn the same information and they have this? Our kids will never get what they need unless everything you just said, Sharif, everything you've been saying in this entire show, we can't teach our kids in a common school system. We can't teach them about these rebellions. We can't teach them about the way that the way that they went down. We can't teach them about how the laws were passed for one group of people over the other group of people now, right? So we have an educator's dilemma at this point that here, I'm going to ask you, what's your solution to what I just said, or if you think there needs to be one. My quick and dirty on it is we need safe harbors that we could put our kids into where they're away from the other people and we can tell them the truth about the world that they live in and prepare them to be free citizens who can vote and have laws passed to their benefit and change and exercise their power. That's one of our interests. We need educators who are within the regular system who will infiltrate and double cross, who will teach people the truth regardless of what the law says. And for everybody else, we need to call it a wash. That's kind of my solution. What would you say about the problem?
You just named a 3-pronged approach, and I think that's the right way. I think, we've said this from, since you and I met. One of the things we were on the same page about was having our own institutions. Particularly education, and it doesn't always have to be a school. Although we should be striving for a school, like we should have this aspirational and practical idea of ensuring that our children have these safe harbors, and again, intellectual, cultural, emotionally safe harbors. And we need educators who are in systems that they are trying to purify it from within, by making sure that they are not intimidated by, whatever nonsense comes down the pike, that they are using that privilege and power of leading a classroom and leading a school and leading a department of educators, that they are using it for educational racial justice purposes. That accurate and inclusive history, the accurate portrayal of what white supremacy is and what humanity is always seeping through, right? And that's what we used to tell our teachers, like, every lesson plan, every time you're planning, every lesson plan is a political document. And every single time you teach is a political act, whether you're teaching in the formal sense in front of the classroom, or if you're having a conversation in the cafeteria or the auditorium, it is a political act. And and depending on which side of the coin you're coming from, right, it's still political. It could be politically oppressive, or it could be politically empowering and informative.
But that's just indoctrination, bro. Why are you talking about indoctrinating children?
Listen. The current indoctrination is white supremacy. And as you said, assimilate. And I always think about when we were young, we learned that, I forget which general, but, he had this thing of the only good Indian is a dead Indian. Right. Like in that, you know, and I just think about like how that, while he applied it to, you know, that particular, you know, community, that's really America's, you know, kind of ethos, right? Like, and when they say dead, they're not just talking about like physically. A lot of times they're talking about intellectually dead. Like, don't think, don't argue, don't rebel, don't resist. Just accept whatever it is that we're ramming down your throat. Just accept it, and then you'll be good. You'll be looked at as one of the good ones. I don't want to be looked at as a good one. I just don't. That ain't my. I don't want to be a good one.
You know,
I want to be like that hat. I want to be that problem child, that problem educator, that problem adult, that problem voter, that problem citizen. Right? That's right. Like that's what I'm be. Because
thank you for the selling in the hat, bro. For people that want one, go to www.citizenstewart.com and go to my store, and you will find a problem child hat, because a system of oppression doesn't deserve obedient children. It deserves problem children. We should be raising problem children. That's my commercial on that particular piece. But to your point, Sharif, I actually think that we're in a very tough bind that we have to be honest with ourselves and with our young people about, because you have a choice. It's like the red pill and the blue pill, or the left door and the right door. You know, one door to go through is to be the complacent, go along to get along. I mean, listen, I've beat up on Coleman during this show, but Coleman's an entire wing of Black thought right now that are trying to create an entire Black accommodationist, white supremacist Black wing. So Glenn Lowry, John McWhorter, Coleman Hughes, Kamel, Candace Owens, Diamond and Silk, you know, Plastic and Garbage, whoever, whoever they come up with, you know, this week to, you know, in ed reform world, we have them, you know, Ian Rowe and others who are basically going along with the line that the things that are befallen Black people have no historical basis that's still relevant today, that today it's just about our behavior, our morality, our families, our culture, our left-wing politics, whatever, as a massive kind of Black apology to white America for us not living up to white America's vision of what we should be. Someone just put in the notes here too, Thomas Sowell. When you have Black people as public teachers whose only audiences are white people that have all the problematic ideas about us, you have to ask them at some point, isn't it interesting to you that the people, most people boosting you are not your own people? And whatever you think about how right or wrong your opinions are in the world, you do have to deal with the problem at some point that your own people aren't buying what you're selling. So you're talking about us to other people as if you're a third party in that. And that's your cognitive dissonance. That's your cultural kind of detachment from your own people. I don't know if someone hurt you. I don't know if some Black girl at prom didn't give you any play. I don't know if you didn't get like the phone number of the one because you were weak and couldn't play any sports. I don't know what it is, but there's a genesis to your hurt and your pain that has you now wanting to hurt Black people professionally for the entertainment and the benefit of white people. And I want to talk about the white people that prop you up and love you so much. The white people that prop you up range from the ones who are on the Charles Murray end, who do it because they literally just need Black people to help them explain why we're inferior, why our families are inferior and our culture is an inferior one, and why our language and how we speak is inferior in our thoughts. The range from that group, though, also to the level-headed white middlemen, the ones who are kind of like, I'm just a centrist. I just like to see both sides. And I like to see, an Ian Rowe and a John McWhorter and a Glenn Lowry or whatnot have debates with the other Blacks because, I like a fair debate. Bruh, it's not a fair debate if you're trying to set up a Mandingo fight between a inauthentic group of Black people who have no connection to other Blacks, who have no logical basis for existing within their own culture, and propping that up as if it's equal to people who literally come out of the communities and the cultures that they are purporting to represent. So I don't know if you think that's fair or not. You let me know.
Listen, the idea that one, there's a continuum. So, 100%. Two, and I think what you said ties exactly into how we had the conversation earlier about like, what's your source? Who's your not only who's your audience, but what's your source? What's your connection to the community that you're criticizing so much, right? Like, and whether it's the pound cake, or whether it's this other stuff that people are talking, that Black people are talking, to say like, no, you need to be more like this group that I found friends in, right? Like, that piece I think has always been there, right? And when we look at what W.B. Du Bois and others were talking about, where we're looking at what Malcolm and Martin was talking, like, it's all been the same, right? Like that letter from the Birmingham jail could be, while it was written to white pastors and reverends and stuff, that could be written to some of these Black intellectuals, as you call it, in the Ebony Towers, who are far removed from the actual Black community to the day-to-day lived experiences. And they feel like, you know what, it goes back to the Obama syndrome. I, as this individual, this is how my life has played out. So I don't have any connection to you all who don't have that same pattern, right? That same circumstances. And it's, for me, it's always hard. Like, why do you look at just this one individual and think that every single thing that you did applies to everybody else? Look at the pattern, that pattern recognition. To me, I think, that's coining and framing that we should use as we're educating our youth, as we're engaging our communities. That's what it is. So that same pattern.
And I want to go back to Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes, one of the main point of the book is to tell you that there is nothing new under the sun. There's always been life and death. There's always been everything in between. There's always been oppressor and oppressed, freedom and slavery, happiness and sadness, laughing and crying. That has always been, it's always going to be. So the way that you balance yourself out is by understanding that there's a time for all those things and recognizing that when it happens. And when I say that there's nothing new under the sun, there's nothing new to the cadre of people I just talked about, like Coleman Hughes and Clarence Thomas and Ward Connerly, let's not forget, and Thomas Sowell, professional Negroes who are professional apologists for racism and the white supremacy camp, have always existed, and they will always exist, and they will always be disconnected from the mainstay of their people. What no one ever puts them on the hook to explain is, why are you all not in alignment with your own people? Why are you this one group of Black people who profess things that only white people are listening to? And they don't have a good answer for that. We all know why it is. We all know why it is, because your bread is really well buttered on that side of the fence. And I know as we wrap up here, I'm going to say one thing about rebelling is knowing when to do it. And it needs to be when there's something major on the hook for your people. In my own life right now in education, I'm seeing the need for realignment. There are people within education who are on the reform side and the school choice side who are, to me, equally as problematic as the people on the left who are fighting a lot of the things that we need. We need our own schools. We need pedagogy. We need to build Black, brown, and beige intellectual capital, and pedagogical capital. That's our own, that we own. We need to own the means of production, knowledge production, for our own people and for our kids, and we need to reclaim our children. So that's our interest. We can't do that with people who on one side are denying us the freedom to start our schools and train our teachers and to run our own schools, because they want to keep us in a system that's been harming us forever. And at the same time, we can't do that with people who are literally on the one side saying, here's a voucher, a ticket to your freedom to do that, while they are also trying to separate us from our voting rights, are also trying to ignore what police and law enforcement are doing to our communities nationally in terms of infringing upon our liberties, and passing a portfolio of other problematic laws and bills that will hurt us in other ways. It's like, hey, we know that you're strung up by a tree, but here's a voucher. As you die from the lynching, at least you'll have a voucher in your hand. It's not going to work. We actually have to call people out on both sides. And I'm just going to end by saying this. We have chumps on both sides. We have people on both sides who will be chumps for whatever movement they're in. A chump for the school choice movement and a chump for the left-wing teacher unionist movement are the same chump in my mind, because both of them are willing to accept some degrees of injustice and oppression to get their myopic thing passed that they want passed. And I'm not willing to do it. That's when you rebel. No, we need new friends. Both of y'all need to go to your respective corners and shut up while the rest of us who are here for the real freedom actually do the real work. That's my final word. What do you got to say, Sharif? What's your final word, brother?
Hey, man, no permanent friends, no permanent enemies, only permanent interest. And what I think what you'll be seeing over the next year or so is, what does this reshaping and morphing look like? And as you said, there's no straight line. There's always, it's not a direct line. There's always, movement and changes and really, understanding that idea of being strung up on a tree, but having a voucher to the grave, like, hey, you could be buried in this cemetery, like, take this, I think that's real. I mean, I also think, it goes back to like organizing and amassing power, right? Like, and we have to stop being shy about, like, no, this is about power. This is about who controls the narrative, who controls the information, it just keeps going back to who's able to control. I want to control the curriculum. I want to control this. I want to control that. And there are some folks who are like, oh yeah, we're okay with that. And there are others who are like, hell no, like every fiber of my being, I'm going to, try to infiltrate and double cross as your father taught you. I think that's absolutely crucial. And we have to remember that negotiations come from a source of power. If it's not based in a source of power, it might be just begging. And we have to be crystal clear about that. Negotiation comes from a source of power. And if you've ignored that, you might just be begging and compromising to an extent that's actually slitting your own throat.
That's a good word to end on. Negotiation from a place of power. And what we've always been told is knowledge is power. So knowledge production must be the ultimate power. And that needs to be what we're fighting for. The ability to produce our own knowledge for our own people. Let's do it. So to my friends in the comments and fam, thank y'all for coming again for another Freedom Friday. I will catch up on all your comments. Usually I try and do a better job of catching them in the middle of the flow while we're there. But I saw some that are just like hitting it right on the head. We're not alone, Sharif. People people like, you look at these comments, you can see that people have been thinking deeply and intently on the same things we are. So,
and in their own communities and all of this, right? But
right.
The oppressor always wants you to think you're alone. Let's never buy into it. You are never, ever alone.
As Michael Jackson told you, you are not alone, right? You are not alone. That's right. That's a theme song for this week. You know what else, Michael Jackson? Y'all need to look up the story behind They Don't Care About Us, his song and video about They Don't Care About Us, and find the banned version of that song. Because what people don't know is there's a banned version of Michael Jackson's They Don't Care About Us. Michael wasn't who y'all thought he was. Michael was more revolutionary than y'all think. So anyways, this has been another Freedom Friday. And hopefully you are freer now than you were when we started this program. But we are still not free. So let's keep coming back together week to week, Friday to Friday, talking about the ideas that will help us get really, really free. Thank you all. Have a great weekend. Enjoy your weekend. Do something good for yourself and for your family. We appreciate y'all.